Let's go. Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today's July 15, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant and his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Please subscribe. Also want to thank the toy video camera Pixel Vision for connecting me with today's guest, Chris Metzler. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
It sure is, Gerry.
Where in the heck are you calling in? Yeah, good to see you. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling in from the Bay Area, so San Francisco, California.
First question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
Oh, what's the best thing for a human being? I mean, no, it's going to sound cheesy, but I think hope, I'm kind of a pragmatic optimist at heart, but
yeah.
The thing about it is that, hope is the thing that kind of helps give a little bit of gas to the fire, and
dude, I'm
figure it out as you go along.
I'm so there. I know fellow anti-war activists, one of them would say hope is for sissies, and it's like, well, yeah, you can look at it that way, but hope is an amazing. I'm all for power, pre-paving positiveness, so that's good. What's your favorite form of information? How it comes into you?
Oh wow, so I I might come across as old school here, and there's a few ones that are competing in my mind, but if I could, newspapers of 30 years ago would be my favorite way to get information. Given that the newspapers have evolved over time, I would probably have to say magazines. So I still love magazines, and I'm glad there's still a few good ones around. And when I say magazines, I mean, I like the paper, I like the flipping, I like just the space they inhabit in front of me, and people always complain about like having the New Yorker, the Economist, just like all them piling up, and I definitely understand it, but like I'm a voracious reader, so they don't stack up too long with me.
Yeah, I love that. I am huge into newspapers, magazines, radio, all that same. But when you said reading, did you become a reader, one, because your parents told you, two, they did it as an example, or three, on your own?
So the reason why it's interesting, so I'm a parent now, and there are things that you intentionally do with your kids. And obviously there's just so much information out there, So if you'd asked me this question 20 years ago, I probably would just said, hey, my parents encouraged me, they, we would go on field trips to the bookstore, regularly. Right. But then since then, you hear about the science and the idea that really the thing that makes kids want to read is, the setting by example that you suggested, And so when I now go back and reflect, I realize like, oh yeah, my parents are reading all the time. And so even though they were asking me, they were setting the example, which was the thing that kind of probably made me curious about, wanting to go down that route.
Really good. And why do you think humans collect or gather information?
Well, I mean, there's so much unknown out there in life and in the world. And I mean, evolutionary speaking, it's like you just didn't know what was around the corner, right? So the more information you had, the more likely you are to survive, right? But I just think, even though there's this kind of evolutionary necessity, I think that there's something about like, it's like a ping pong ball, not ping pong ball, a pinball, it's like once you launch it, it just gets your synapses going, and you want to kind of learn more about what's going on in the next steps, So I wish I had a better answer to that, because it's
that was good.
Fascinating thing, but
No, it was good, Chris, because actually you kind of answered the next question. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
So I would say that what was the first option? You said needed, or
is this need or want to collect information? Yeah.
So this is the reason why I was kind of hedging when I answered the previous question, right? Is that I think that it's in us as human beings based on a need, but that we evolve for it to be a want. And
Yeah.
so I think, even now, so, you know, um, or maybe it starts out as a need, but I think with most folks, it becomes a want.
Yeah. It's really good. And do thoughts create emotions?
Yeah, I would assume so. Where are you kind of going with that question? I guess in the sense that I'm just like, yeah, of course, that's great emotion.
Well, no, I mean it's we're going to go into some questions about thinking and language now, so that's fine. I
Well, the
mean,
reason I ask is like even early. So my youngest brother's 40th birthday is later this week, so I was working on a gift for him, and so like I'm trying to think about what I'm going to express and things like, and so of course it's like there were a lot of thoughts that went through my head and a lot of emotions to go along with it,
yeah.
yeah.
Fill in the blank, Chris. I don't know what I think until I
mean, I don't know what to think until I reflect, or until I read, or I mean, I could say also until I take a walk, but I feel like before even I take a walk or a swim or whatever, it's like, I need to read.
Yeah. That's really good. McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. But I
Oh,
love
interesting.
this. Yeah, this woman about a couple weeks ago says, I don't know what I think until I rant about it for 30 minutes.
That's a
But
good one.
that is like reflect. Yeah, I mean, your main one was read. I like that. But I also like reflect, walk, swim. These are all part of that process. Then
Yeah.
so can
You know what?
humans, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say also, I mean, like I like the Joan Didion one,
Yeah,
in this not like it's not like I mean, I write a lot more nowadays than I probably did 30 years ago, just
yeah,
because, the tools are so easy and also there's prompts and ways to share, Um, maybe age factors into that too, but like it is true there are things like there like in most of my normal life, um I need to read to figure out how I think. But like when it comes to the past, when I like I don't know what I necessarily know about like how do I say this? So like if it's something I've experienced, then I really don't know how I feel until I write about it. But if
yeah,
it's about like larger knowledge out in the world, I need
yeah,
the information to come in. So when it's more personal, I have to write it, I think.
yeah. It's really good. Um Chomsky says language is not, wait, no, I left this out. Can humans think without language?
No, I would have a hard time imagining.
Wow. Because Chomsky says language is not just words, it's a culture, tradition, a
Hmm.
unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. What do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
I mean, I would imagine that probably like when language then I think comes back to touch,
Yeah,
in the sense of, whether it be, a hug or a pat or just,
yeah,
sharing space. So that kind of physical intimacy, I guess, um, with anybody.
yeah. No, that's really good. In fact, one of my favorite answers ever for the what's your favorite form of information was Craig Baldwin. He said human touch.
Oh,
It's like most people don't think of human touch as information. And then Ann Magnuson said the same thing. She said a hug. So, a hug or
well,
a
I love to
touch.
be in good company with those two.
Yeah, I mean, a pat or a hug is a great way to, remedy communication breakdown. But your observations, Chris, of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
Well, like, so I started off our conversation saying as like a pragmatic optimist, right? And I would never never think of myself as a cynic, Um, as each year goes on, I feel like I'm having to do battle with the cynicism a little bit more than I would have ever suspected,
Yeah.
And so I still do believe that human beings are more thinking versus feeling,
Wow,
Um,
that's good.
but with that said, is that I do feel like we're at the stage where feelings are taking on um, a greater role. And then unfortunately, I feel like there are feelings that are masquerading as thought, and, you know, and when I say that, I think that we're more thinking versus feeling. I'm not saying like, oh, thinking's better than feeling. I think it's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like that, you want a kind of a unified concept. It's like, when people talk about like the unity of like science and religion, or, art and science, right? I kind of feel like you need this kind of unified sphere of like thinking and feeling. But right now, I feel like that we're a little bit lopsided on the feeling part, and that
Yeah.
feelings are getting labeled as thinking, and it's just causing lots of problems in the world that I wish didn't exist at the moment.
Dude, you got ESP. You really anticipate a lot of where we're going, art
Okay.
and science in various places, but a few things. Most people answer that. I think we're more feeling beings. They literally say, I think we're more feeling. And so, Britt, you can't really separate it in a lot of ways, but we invented the words thinking and feeling. You said unified sphere is so well put, because we invented the words. We think we can say, oh, feeling and thinking aren't as integrated as we want to think, because Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. And I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? Like people who meditate, they go, okay, now think about not thinking. And then there's a bumper sticker on my street on a car. It says, don't believe everything you think. And I'm like, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
It's such a, it's one of those things where, you wish there wasn't the friction between the two, but
Yeah.
obviously the friction between the two obviously creates the conversation too.
That's an amazing thing, because some of my questions at the beginning are, is it more this or more that? Well, of course it's both, and it depends. But this one woman said, the word more doesn't function in your question. Because these are just, I'm for, stories, anecdotes, tangents. You don't have to answer the question. These are just prompts. But
Right.
it's like, these are two from Alan Turing in the 50s. Is thinking a function of the soul?
Hmm. I'm gonna answer in a very binary way. Is I like, my faith would say yes. I wouldn't be able to explain it or whatever, but that's the way that like it's not it's not a thinking thing, it's a feeling thing. So like I feel that yes, that thinking is part of the soul.
Yeah. The second Turing question is, can machines think?
No, or at least not at this moment.
Yeah.
I have a hard time imagining. Now, Gerry, you might appreciate this. So like I have a hard time imagining that there's so many variables um, involved in the way that we as human beings think, that I think it would, like, anything would just be just not like, it would be kind of a false replication. It's all just like I'm losing my words at the moment. It would always just be false in some way.
Yeah.
But with that said, if you'd asked me about digital video, like 30 years ago, I was like, would video ever be, as good as film, and I'm all about like, well, film has all these kind of like millions of chemical reactions and things like that. Video, it's only going to have so many pixels up on the screen. How's it going to do? Right.
Yeah.
Well, I've been proven wrong on that, in the sense that, video is pretty damn great,
Yeah.
nowadays too. So, but I just, I mean, is simulacrum, is that the right word that like, in the sense of like what the machine is,
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting because I've asked, really super pro expert audio guys, is digital as warm as analog? And one goes,
right.
oh yeah, and one will go, nope. I mean, they literally, and I respect them both, and they're both knowledgeable. So but that was good.
You know what that makes me think about, Gerry? So like I'm not colorblind, but like I have friends that are colorblind. Some are that are artists and things, right? And you just realize that we all have so many different ways that we're like, not just based on culture, but our own biology about how we're taking in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just like, like I have a pretty good memory, and so I'm always surprised when people can't remember things.
Yeah.
And then you just realize, like, okay, we're all taking. So it's kind of like the audio question, right? It's like, it all depends on how your body's taking in the inputs,
Yeah.
I guess,
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I would imagine that I pursue meaning, but with the alternative motive that, pursuing meaning provides happiness for me,
Yeah.
but happiness without meaning, doesn't mean as much, but,
Yeah.
meaning can be, multi-layered in different ways.
Yeah, I got it from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says happiness doesn't tend to last, meaning tends to last. What do you think?
Well, I like that in the sense that, because then it's like meaning is like a bucket, right? Of things that you can kind of return to and continue to kind of refill, your happiness or whatever. And I mean, it's interesting, like, so I take a lot of photos, no surprise there as a filmmaker, I didn't take as many photos at some earlier points in time, partly based on cost and just, functionality. And then sometimes people ask me like, well, why are you taking like, because I think I'm more intentional with my photography, like, but the thing that I always try to, when people ask me like, why do I take photographs, is that the photos don't necessarily provide meaning, but their meaning evolves over time, so like, taking a photo right now, it means something to me right now, and obviously I want to do it in a creative way, but then that photo then takes on different meanings over time, that's why I always encourage people, like, never delete photos you think are bad right now, it's like, you don't know what that photo might mean to you 20 years from now. Or I was talking with one of my production partners, Jeff Springer, a friend of mine, and like, it was one of those things where it's just like, sometimes you realize like, wait, at this event, there was a photo and this person you didn't even know was in the photo. And then you meet them again 10 years later, and then you become friends, there's the accidental nature of it.
No, it's a great thing. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
So that's an interesting one, because I haven't thought about that before. So like my gut, if I could, and because it's kind of one of those ones where it's like, okay, well, I got to answer the question. The prompt. It's like, I would think that the former, in the sense that the brain is detecting consciousness, so in the sense that consciousness is using the brain as a tool to do that, right? That would be the way I think often I would think about it, right? But you know, knowing, what know about biology and science and things, it's like, I mean, it'd be a whole lot less sexy if the brain is creating the consciousness, because that's just these chemical reactions and stuff. The brain creating the consciousness totally could be good. And just like, that's one that, like, it's just not even a construct of the world that I really want to even consider.
Right.
So I'm just going to go with the first, because
No, that's good.
a lot better.
And that's funny because the neuroscientists and biologists say people think with their gut. They don't know. I mean, that's not just impulse and intuition, but the stomach is part of the thinking process. And we wouldn't think that so much. We think it's the brain. But I like that metaphor because it's almost real. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Speed of thought.
Dude, there's no right or wrong answers, but that one you got right.
I just figured I mean, I feel like speed of thought, I mean, in the sense of, if you think about it as electricity and thing, I just,
Yeah. No, dude, I ask all these questions and I want the people to answer them the way I think. That's fine. If they don't, it helps me consider the other way around.
Right.
But 80%, almost 90 say speed of light is faster.
Oh, really?
I love it when someone says speed of thought. It's like it's a no-brainer. We thought up the speed of light, so thought is faster than light. I proved it, but I mean, it's again, there is no right or wrongs. These are just to have fun.
No, and that's what I love, because we did something like this, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago, Gerry, and that moment still, sticks with me to this day, and I love it.
That's good. I love it too. I've changed, because in 40 years I've done 1,000 interviews, and I've always based them on 90 minutes because of a 90-minute audio cassette.
Okay.
and so then I asked people, when COVID started, it just broke it wide open. I've done 700 since COVID. And it's because it's so much easier. I don't have to drive. You don't have to go to my house. I don't have to schedule. It's so much easier. And I'm talking to people in Ukraine and Italy and everywhere, and it's so fun. But I've learned this process, Chris, and I don't know how it's hard to determine it. But now, over the last half a year, I sense the pacing, and about 80 minutes in, I goes, well, we only did some of the questions. Can we plan a part 2? And usually they go, yes. And then a small percentage won't book the part 2. Because they got a busy schedule or whatever. But it is fun because it's sort of like I'm juggling throughout to see how much, because I want to go deeper than the norm.
Yeah.
So here's it's fun. Audre Lorde, the poet. You can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Her colleague Yvonne Rainer said, "Oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?" And it doesn't have to be tangible.
I don't even know how to answer that question, Gerry.
Well, let me suss it out a little, because I open some of the questions with cute quotes. By putting it in the context, you don't have to put it in the context of dismantling the master's house or exposing the tools. And you don't even have to use the word new. Really, what I'm asking is, what tool do you most gravitate towards? Then if you want to apply it to other things I mentioned in the quotes, that's fine.
I mean, I would imagine that, kind of just writing is the tool that I gravitate towards,
Yeah.
in the sense of, because, one is you can get it out pretty quickly, right? But then you can revise and edit,
Yeah.
And it's something to share. And I think as a tool, it's one of those ones where people can utilize it at their own speed, You can
Yeah.
read it fast. You can read it slow. You can deliberate about it. You can reread a sentence or whatever, So as a tool, it seems to be like the most modular,
Yeah.
I mean, I've always been amazed by like people whose like tools are like, they just want to go and create some music, or paint. Like my wife, when she wants to think, she goes and paints, and it's really neat. But how about like, it's totally anathema
Yeah.
to like the way that, uh, um,
No,
so
I love you saying writing. It's important because I know you as a filmmaker, and we'll eventually get into talking about documentary filmmaking and filmmaking in general. And I like you saying most modular. What does modular mean in that context? What's another word, or suss that out a little?
I mean, I guess when I think of modular, it means that, in this, sort of way, is that it's something that can be constructed and deconstructed in multiple different ways.
Yeah.
Um, and based on how it's kind of reappropriated, it can take on different meaning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is like that, obviously can be constructed in different ways, but it's the deconstruction part for the meaning that I think is the most important.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, I ask people the tool question so long. One guy says, well, what about a toy? So now I ask, what's a toy you gravitate towards? Or is there any toy you like or utilize?
Well, when I was a kid, I'd say silly putty, but nowadays I think water guns. I have a 9-year-old daughter, and these are like there's something about the kind of horseplay that water guns.
Horse. I love that word horseplay. And is your daughter on YouTube, there's a video of you being interviewed and she's sitting next to you.
Okay, I'll have to search that out.
Oh, dude, if you haven't seen it, it is so delightful to watch. It really was. It was really a great way for me to get in touch with you. I mean, that's the funny thing about prepping for these interviews too. I can go online and read, going back to reading. Your website has these typed out, you can read, but I always go to YouTube just to see if there's some interviews or something on YouTube too. And what do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I mean, so more often than not, I don't think I worry when I go to bed, but when I do, it probably, gravitates towards two things. One is just, I've kind of an obsessive brain with certain things where I just like certain things get replayed over and over again. And so I think when there's just greater tragedy, out there in the world, it's hard not to kind of like this feedback loop, like, so for example, like when the Civil War in Syria was going on, it was just hard. Like, you just don't know how it's going to end, and it's going to be around for a while, and it's hard to, my mind just gets stuck on that, and then of course, as a freelance artist, obviously sometimes financial things, kind of annoying, but thankfully I've been, haven't had to run into like, usually not too many worse some nights, even if I'm worried, usually I've been able to process it during the day and then pick it back up in the morning.
Yeah. You'll love this. You know where I got that question?
Where's that?
Earl Morris's film on, oh God, now I can't think of his name. One of those political guys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I was like, that is a good question. I mean, that's where I got all my questions from other sources. I made up a few, but it's such, and I'll tell you, Chris, the truth is when I go, what do you worry about when you go to bed at night? And someone goes, money. I don't like think, oh, you're a frivolous materialistic. That's a normal practical thing, and it is. A lot of people say, I don't worry when I go to bed. I want to fall asleep and, appreciate this time in resting. So McLuhan learned from Ezra Pound, the poet, that artists are the antenna of the race. They're
Mm.
broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Chris, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
So I think I think it's going to sound a little bit trite, but like I just think that there's just so much uncertainty in the world,
Yeah,
that sometimes it's easier to kind of just put blinders on,
yeah,
so that you can fall asleep at night.
yeah,
I like to hope that I don't live life in that way, but
yeah,
I understand that so this goes back to like it all depends on what the tools you have to deal with the unknowable, right? So I mean,
yeah,
you asked earlier about like, what encouraged me to read and like whether, but like, ideally your family or the people you grew up with, it's like they help kind of pass along the tools, So my dad was an entrepreneur, my mom was a teacher, and obviously there's a lot of uncertainty growing up in an entrepreneur's family.
yeah,
Is an inventor. And I think the thing about it is like, like I always knew my parents loved me and I knew things would be fine, right? But there's a lot of uncertainty. And so like,
yeah,
you know, growing up, I think you just, you get used to the unknown aspects,
yeah.
and I think that a lot of people don't necessarily develop those tools, and so if you don't have that and then you then become an adult, right? I think that it's much easier to then, get the tools that are kind of shielding you, from things.
No, it's a really important thing. It's because we need to know how to unlearn because we're sort of destined to kind of learn. And we
Mm,
want to be discerning about what we're learning. I mean, I respect you highly as a documentarian taking on Salton Sea and Fishbone. These were things that people might not have known about,
mm,
and you put it in a realm where they can learn about them. So that's like, you know, uh, just this pursuing knowing something. And it's funny because I didn't name this podcast. I sort of hijacked my friends, and I'm probably wrong about everything. Yeah, it's like Fireside Theater saying everything you know is wrong. It's like, yeah, my big thing is there's no such thing as a stupid question. If you don't know something, that's why you're asking a question. But you and me know, making films, you don't want to ask stupid questions when you have this much time with one of your subjects, but I sort of specialize in stupid questions. So that's the name of my book. In fact, is Strange Questions.
oh, I'm gonna
So
pick it up.
yeah, no, I'll send you a PDF. But do artists have moral obligation?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think all human beings have moral obligations.
Yeah,
So in the sense that with decisions or actions that you take, um, so you know, at least then those things are considered. I think any sort of action you take has to consider of what the moral repercussions can be.
yeah.
So yeah, so artists are just like anybody else. Or the
Are you more afraid of new ideas or more afraid of old ideas?
so I my first inclination would be like that I would say old ideas, so in the sense
Yeah,
that like, but with that said, um I very much understand the fear of new ideas as well,
yeah,
especially when there's some that, don't necessarily seem to be fully informed,
yeah,
Um so yeah, well, and then also like so many new ideas are often just, they rhyme with the old and,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I mean, uh, I guess I would maybe call into question the ideas like, you know, I th- I think there are a lot less new ideas than what we assign as new ideas. I think there's a lot of old ideas masquerading as new ideas. But in general, if I look back on history, um, most of the true new ideas, I think, have always been pretty great. Or
Yeah.
uh, even if some of them have unintended consequences.
Yeah. Because I didn't open with Q quotes, but I sometimes refer to two quotes that I basically got the question from. John Cage says, I can't understand why people are frightened of new ideas. I'm frightened of the old ones. And Charles Kettery said, people are very open-minded about new things as long as they're exactly like the old ones. So can you conjure up your earliest memory ever or one of them?
Yeah, I mean, I was probably one of the earliest memories I can imagine is living in Florida, and a big tree got knocked down in a storm. And I remember my mom and dad cutting up the tree, and a friend and I, Mark, um, went and created like this kind of igloo-like structure out of all
Yeah.
the branches and things. I just remember being a very hot day and somehow like putting some ice in the middle of this structure. I just remember watching the ice melt in the water, melt in the sun. Probably was like
Wow.
3.5 years old. It's like just a very abstract early memory.
That is pretty detailed too. I loved it. Is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Blessing.
Yeah. Can you tell me someone within your immediate family who had an impact on you, and what specifically was that impact?
So I think it'd probably be my mom,
Yeah.
and when I was growing up, um, you could probably say that I had, ADHD, and was not necessarily the easiest kid to be around. But my mom believed in me and loved me and helped, learn and research and help me get me the tools to kind of deal with, the unique way my body and brain worked, and I think not just with me, but many other people is that my mom always like believed in people, or believed in the
Yeah.
best of people and was patient with them, and understanding of who they were,
Yeah.
and so I think that that's something that I carry over from my mom, to this day, in the sense that um, just the kind of good faith and anybody, and the
Beautiful.
idea that we each have our own kind of challenges and things like that. Mm.
Yeah, my mom bestowed on me a lot of that too. But one of my favorite quotes by her is, "God give me patience and give it to me now."
I like
um, now, same question outside your immediate family. Someone who had an impact on you, and what specifically was the impact?
Okay, so this is a little bit more negative, but there was a friend of mine from college that I remember sometimes a couple of years after college, we were all struggling in different ways as filmmakers and things. And I remember him sharing one night that he's like, oh, I just wish that I could be like a 4-year-old again, and
Yeah.
just be a 4-year-old all the time. And I was just like, well, why is that? He's like, oh, it's just like everybody would take care of me. I'd be happy. And I was like, well, wouldn't you know about all these things that you want? And he's like, no, I wouldn't want to know all that. It was a very much an uber ignorance is bliss sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, there was something about when he said this, and I understood why he was aspiring to that.
Yeah.
To me, I was like, it really to me is like, I was like, there's no way in hell I ever want that. You know, I did like so the idea, like, you asked about the memories of blessing or curse. It's just like that.
Yeah,
It's like I was like it distilled down in my mind. It's like, no, that is entirely not what
yeah.
I want my like, yeah, life is hard right now, but it's kind of like living in the matrix, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like, no, I want to be aware, and I'm okay with.
No, it's really well put because it's something you don't want. It's negative in a way that you didn't agree with it, but that's all artists are striving to reach, that innocence of child, you know, perception. So it was interesting, but saying I want someone to take care of me, and it gave you uh, a different way of looking. So,
Yeah.
did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Yes, I was raised Baha'i.
Wow, Baha'i, how cool is that? And
Yeah.
so, do you pray?
Yeah, I still pray.
And if God does exist, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Uh well, I guess the thing about so I wouldn't expect God to say anything to me after I die, in the
Yeah,
sense that I imagine, it's like life is just this kind of extended journey,
yeah,
and so and I guess, if God was to say something to me, like it totally just goes against the way that, I've accepted the idea that I won't have all the answers ever,
yeah,
I'll get little building blocks and things like that,
yeah.
but to think that I'm ever get to a point where somebody's going to be like, okay, well, now I'm going to tell you, uh, I mean, even like, when you make a documentary, um, like I learn a lot about the subjects I'm telling the
Yeah,
film about, but it's like I don't know everything, and I don't ever intend to know things. And there is something a little bit. I mean, even people that you love in life, right? You won't know them
yeah,
entirely, right?
yeah,
But it's just the name of the nature, the name of the game, like of life. So all you can do is aspire to, like, I mean, there was a point in time many years ago where I got a little sad, the idea that, like, you just would not be able to read every single book that you wanted to read ever in your life,
yeah,
and there's something, but that's okay. That's what, like, this is also like, I'm a very anti bucket list sort of guy,
yeah,
because it assigns like evaluation, like that this
yeah,
one experience is better than another, so yeah, God, I love you, but, like, I don't expect anything to be said, and I don't need,
yeah. But
you'd be contradictory to actually say anything.
no, it's a beautiful answer, and you really sussed it out beautifully. Because you put it into context, larger picture, because most people go, you did a good job. It's like, okay, that's what most people want God to say to them. You did a good job. I just like, okay, I heard that so many times. I want, one of
Oh,
my favorites. Yeah, one of my favorites is this guy goes, God says, check the list. Oh, we made a mistake. You're going back. Okay, do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
well, I definitely don't think that evil uses people as a vehicle. Like, I
Yeah,
just, like, that's anathema to me. Do I think evil people exist? Like, um no, I don't think there are evil people that exist. I mean, there are people that do evil actions. I don't think that there's anything that can be done,
yeah.
to it. But, like, yeah, I mean, yeah,
Well,
and it doesn't. Sorry.
you anticipated the next question, so we'll suss it out. How do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? Someone whose actions were, you know, resulting in something, let's just say bad. Because I'll set this one up. Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
Hmm.
Coppola's quote from The Mob: keep your friends close and your enemies closer. JFK said, forgive your enemy, but don't forget their name. And Fellini says, I need an enemy. So again, it's a lot of thoughts. The basic question is, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? But first, how would you react to Alan Watts? If you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them.
So in general, I think that definitely seems to hold true, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like, so when I have an enemy, right, in general, you know, um, I'll make my statement or case, and then if there isn't any way to have a dialogue with them, then just walk away.
Yeah.
There's no reason, now that doesn't mean they still don't sit in my mind for a while. I try to let them decompose in my mind and move away. With that said, when you have an enemy who then is likely to do harm to others, then
Yes.
I think you have to speak up and take action.
Yeah.
So the idea is that if they've done something bad and it's not leaving you feeling well and you want revenge or whatever it might be, I'm not into that,
Yeah.
but you have to engage the enemy if you're working to help prevent them from doing, future harm, um, and it's interesting. I forgot what it was, but maybe it's like the human brain. It's some NPR show recently. They were interviewing a couple people about like revenge, and I
Yeah.
have it bookmarked. I need to go back to this radio show, but like there was a guy who was, I think he was an attorney and now he's a sociologist. And like he was just getting into the whole idea of like the biological reason why revenge is kind of in there, and it's
Yeah.
just such this outdated thing, of like, the idea is like, revenge is not the thing that any of us really want, like it is this other thing that's just kind of, so I don't know. It's one of those ones I need to go back to and listen. But I was like, this is very fascinating. The idea is
Yeah.
like, can understand why your body's doing something or your brain versus
Yeah.
what your real intentions are.
Yeah, greed reminds me of something. I like. Well, who are you, the greed police? They're too greedy. Well, everybody's greedy in a way, but the word covet carries baggage that's kind of more negative. Same like revenge. It sounds like a cheesy Hollywood movie, but it's probably a human thing. Like you were raised a Baha'i. My friend was raised Buddhist. And at 12, I was like intrigued how he was articulate. And then I saw him a couple years later. I says, "What's the main thing you've learned being raised a Buddhist?" And he goes, "Not to hate." And I'm like, well, is it human to hate? But that's here. You perfectly led to the next question. Nassim Taleb said games were created to give non-heroes the illusion of winning. In real life, we don't know who wins or loses, but we can tell who a hero is. My friend said, well, villains don't think they're bad. They want control. Heroes want freedom. And Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist, says when the criminal gets caught, does he go, whoa, my criminal skills weren't up to snuff that day? Or does he go, oh, I did something morally and socially wrong? So again, the prompts go all over the place. You can say what you want, but the basic question is, does punishment work?
So I would assume that punishment in some form works in certain circumstances,
Yeah.
but that we're very much too much of a punishment heavy society,
Yeah.
Um, so, punishment, I mean, it's kind of like shame, right? Like
Yeah.
I understand, shame can be a very powerful thing, right? But like,
Yeah.
it can go too far,
Yeah.
And so I think the thing about it is punishment is one of those things is like, or shame, it's like to raise awareness of what the action was and
Yeah.
why it's problematic, and then once it's there, then it's all about pivoting towards like how do you provide the people tools so that they understand why they don't want to do it. This is like, you're familiar with like restorative justice.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah, and so the thing that I had never heard of restorative justice until, when I made the Fishbone film quite a while ago, because there was an attorney that came and said, "Oh, well, has the guys thought about doing this like thing? Like if we could get based on an element of the film." And I was like, "Oh, well, what's this restorative justice thing?" And it's like, and it was such a fascinating concept, or even like what they did in was it Liberia or Sierra Leone, where it's like these kind of human rights tribunals. It's like it's not about like punishing the people. It's like giving people voice so people understand that they feel heard, and the people that then did the actions, the understand of like how can they grow as human beings. I don't know. I just believe a lot in the growth of human beings. Some of us are faster and slower than others, but I guess the bigger question is I'm not of the having kids, right? It's like I know that there are times when I have to punish them, for them to learn or not, but I always feel like punishment always kind of goes hand in hand with talking about things as well. The punishment, and that doesn't mean like that.
No, suss out the bigger picture,
right?
Yeah. I mean, I don't word that question well. I have to work on it, because I could say, does rehabilitation work? Well, of course, punishment works. It's not quite the verb I'm after. I'm like, because a lot of people are hardcore lefty progressives and they go, no, punishment, it's a prison industrial complex. And we know that. But it's like, it's sort of, if someone's doing something harmful, do you want them walking down the street to continue to do the harm? How are you going to deal with that? Or, what I was usually say to someone like you with a parent, I go, if your child, if she comes home and says, someone's bullying me, what do you say to her? What advice do you give? So.
Yeah. No, it's a fascinating thing because I always kind of err on the side of error, right? So in the sense of I'd rather have more people not to have faith in the rehabilitation and get them out there in the world, because I just think the number of people that are affected by it, is much greater, But with that said, it's like nobody wants to like release somebody on the street and then next they kill somebody. But like I don't know. It's one of those things where you always have to kind of like, I'm not a mathematical person by any means, but like there are a little bit of an odds to think like, what's the likelihood of this, Oh, Gerry, just a heads up. So when I put it on my calendar, I put it on for about an hour or so. I can probably go a little bit longer if need be, but I'll definitely do a game 2.
We'll do part 2 then. Well, how much more do you want to go? 5 minutes or 2 minutes?
I can do another 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, 10 or 15. So that's good.
I just wanted to give you a heads up so you could kind of calibrate.
No, that's good. Based on Well, it's sort of like the next question is more your calling. And I really appreciate how articulate and concise you are, Chris. This is really fun. James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, this is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree? Years later, William Faulkner said sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism. Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Well, without getting too technical, right? As I think it's about how do you cut through the noise, right? So sometimes you have to kind of refine and reduce the things to be able to kind of see it. So I don't know that it's ever, it's not making it up, it's thinning it down to be able to see it. Because I think that, we as humans have a hard time doing that in the moment, and so you need somebody to step aside to pare it back, and share,
I like
it's kind of, I mean, this is maybe a bad example, but like, it's kind of like one of those things where, I think Quentin Tarantino was asked about like, why is film better than TV,
Yeah.
And it there, and I think the crux of his argument was that film is one of those things where it's a finite period of time. TV is, it's episodic by nature and there's no
Yeah.
necessarily end, and there can be really great moments, but like there's something about the condensed aspect of it, that makes it take on more meaning,
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is true, like with the idea of like, taking what you see in life and pulling it together. It really is just about, the framing device,
Yeah.
helps our brain process.
Yeah. It's really good because how has that switched? I have a question when we go into part 2, when we talk about docs. Now all docs are 3 to 6 hour, that's what I say to people when it's really good. Like with you, Chris, here, I goes, this could be an 8-part Netflix series. and and that it is, the documentaries turned into episodic, and episodic TV turned into film because, you had to watch the whole episode of Sopranos or whatever. So it's blended and flipped. But the other flip out is, watching films on DVDs like my wife and I do. We stop and we talk about it. And then, it's just a varied experience now. And I mean, I'm going to go to USC tonight where went to school and see Amy Berg's new film on Jeff Buckley.
Oh, nice.
I like that because I'm going to be in a theater and I literally scream out, turn your fucking cell phones off. These kids, it is, don't get me started on that, but it is like, they cannot watch a film without having access to their cell phone. So they mutate it. You can't change that. Yeah. But I'm just saying, it is so intense to watch a film in a big theater, which no one does anymore. Yeah. Sorry, they don't do that. And I mean, not no one, but you know what I'm saying. So yes, sorry, exactly. Sorry to go on a rant, but that's we can, sort of do this one. What was the tipping point for you to, I would assume your dad being an entrepreneur, that you were first pursuing business, because what did you go to USC to both be a filmmaker and business? So where's that tipping point, like in grade school and high school, and go, I want to be a filmmaker, I want to pursue business?
So a lot of this is based on like later reflection, right? Versus, knowing what it's the time. So the tipping point probably is like when I was going into high school in 9th grade, I was taking debate. I was going to take debate. And, but about a week into the class, I realized that debate was going to kind of conflict with some other things. I can't remember, or maybe it was just like every weekend you have to travel to these debate tournaments and stuff. And I don't know why, but like that just was not vibing with me at the time. And so, I was like, okay, what other classes could I take? And so the one class that was still available was crafts. And so that's like pottery and, knitting, things like that. I wasn't super interested, but my mom basically said, hey, give it a try, see what you like, if you like it, and can make a decision from there. I think my other option was like automotive shop or something like that, and like that was definitely not something I was interested in at the point. I probably had some biases against it at the time, but after a weekend, crafts, I met some friends. I liked what we were doing, and I wound up probably taking like every single arts class my high school allowed, over the next 4 years. And later on, my mom said that like it wound up being such the best thing because she's like, you didn't have any problem with being able to debate or talk, and she's like, taking these arts classes and things balanced you out a lot more, and that I think was what her hope was when she was encouraging me to take crafts, so that would be the tipping point, but not one, like when I went to go to college, I knew USC had a good film school, but I wasn't choosing business because of practicality. It's just, I probably chose business because it's like my dad was a businessman, you know, even though he was an inventor, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, I describe him as a businessman. And, but the thing I was really interested in was advertising. And this is the late 80s, early 90s. And there's all this kind of like the cinematic transformation of advertising, you know, particularly with Nike, you know. And I was like, oh, I want to do advertisements, you know. I didn't know how advertisements were made, but like they were like these little mini films. And I was just like, okay, that's what I want to do, you know. And it just so happened that I took what's called Introduction to Cinema. My freshman year is my first one of my GEs. I was like, oh, this is really cool, you know, get to take the cinema class instead of just like literature English, you know. And that year, the person who usually taught it was on sabbatical. And so this kind of postmodernist theorist, Marcia Kinder, taught the class. And it was one of the wackiest class. And like, it was she was used to teaching like graduate students and things. And so she just like totally overhauled that syllabus. And we saw like the way that she talked about film, you know, was just like fascinating. And I think after that, I was like, oh, this is really cool. I never have thought about movies in this way, even though I liked movies. And then I was like, okay, well, I'd love to study film too, you know? And so like people always, when they see, you know, this kind of like studying both business and film, you know, they're like, oh, well, you know, you did it because like business was like, you know, the safety net for you, you know, if the film thing didn't work out, it's like, no, that's not what it was all about at all. You know, I was like, I liked working both sides of my brain, you know, and it's like, not I liked the people in the business school, I liked the people in the cinema school, but man, I didn't want to hang out with the same types of people all the time, you know, and so I never thought about like the business being a practical thing. It's just something that I liked learning about, you know, and obviously it's come in handy over time, but like it, you know, there was no safety net consideration at all when I embarked in, you know, on this journey of mine.
Yeah, it's beautiful how you laid it out. I have to tell you a few things evoked. One is, you know, the McLuhan world, his first book's all about advertising. And eventually, when you said Nike commercials, you know, this like high art, you know, Marshall said advertising is the cave art of the 20th century because people want to diss advertising, but they don't realize, you know, David Mamet, Frank Zappa, Warhol, the Wizard of Oz guy, the guy who invented film, that tons of people started in advertising because it comes right out of symbolism. And Burroughs does a Nike TV commercial. You can watch it on YouTube. And it's basically William Burroughs spouting McLuhanisms, the biggest junkie in American literature, spouting McLuhanisms, selling tennis shoes. And to me, it's like the epitome. And, you know, the thing about USC too is, you know, I got here 45, you know, in 1980. So I started going to UCLA, not to school, but to go see screenings because they're kind of known as the more artsy film, and USC is more the business film school. And eventually all the free screenings at USC were way better. And I got to show my films there. David James taught experimental film there. It's an amazing, and you know, I still go there. The guy who's programs there, I'm going to have him on my podcast next week, Alex Ago. Do you know Alex? Anyways, he's done an amazing job of, you know,
he does great.
Yeah. So anyways, it's fun that you brought all that up because people would say, oh, you just use the cliche parental thing. Do you have something to fall back on, son? You know, it's like, no, you were really honest, laid your cards on the table. Thank you for saying that, you know, about business and film.
Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that, not to take too much of a tangent, but you know, at the beginning of every semester, if you go into the CNTV department, they have this, you know, it lists every film that's going to screen in every class during the semester. At least they used to, you know?
Yeah.
And you could just walk in and every day of the week, there's probably like 5 to 10 film screening. And the thing is, I don't know how they are at the time. It's just like come in. You don't need to be part of it, and just come watch the movie, you know? And I was like, fuck, if I lived in LA as an adult, I'd just be like, you know.
It's ridiculous because I've met John Sayles, Frederick Wiseman. It's endless who I've met because the screenings. And the funniest thing, sorry, one more little quick one. It's about an hour drive from Venice to USC. Most people are like, I don't want to drive an hour to go see a film. It's like the best part of the evening is being in the car with my friend talking. The second best could be the film. Sometimes the film's not that good, but the third element of the evening is the filmmaker's usually there. So a lot of times the filmmaker talking is better than their film. You know? So it really susses out this amazing evening. And so, Chris, it's really been an amazing time with you, and I look forward to part 2. It's so good we reconnected, and you reached out to me. I think I've been sending emails to your wrong email for years trying to do this on my podcast. When you reached out to me, I was like, perfect, let's do this. Thank you so much, Chris.
Cool. Thanks again, Gerry. Talk to you soon.
Yep. I'll hit the end broadcast button now, but I hope this never ends and we can keep talking forever and ever. See you later. Thanks.
Okay. And then, can I talk to you offline or?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.